Daniel Park discovered his ability in an empty parking garage at 3 a.m. He was walking to his car after a late shift. Third level. Concrete and shadows. No other cars. No other people. Completely alone. Daniel looked down at his hands. Blinked. They were gone. Not obscured. Not hidden. Just absent. He could feel them. Could move his fingers. But visually, they didn't exist. He checked his reflection in a car window. Nothing. Empty clothes walking through space. No head. No skin. No body. Just the physical sensation of existing in a form that had no visual presence. Daniel stood perfectly still. Processing. Trying to understand. The moment he heard footsteps, someone approaching from the stairwell, his body snapped back into visibility. Instant. Complete. Like he'd never been invisible at all. The person walked past. Didn't notice anything unusual. Didn't see Daniel standing there trying to understand what had just happened. Daniel waited until he was alone again. Focused. Willed himself invisible. Nothing happened. Tried harder. Concentrated. Still visible. Still frustratingly solid and present. Then he stopped trying. Stopped thinking about it. Just stood there in the empty garage. Existing without observation. And slowly, gradually, his body faded from view again. Daniel understood immediately. The ability only worked when no one was watching. Including cameras. Including reflections. Including himself trying to verify it. He could turn invisible. But only when absolutely no one, including himself, could observe the process. Daniel tested it obsessively over the next month. He learned the rules, and hated how paradoxical they were. The invisibility activated automatically when he was completely unobserved. No human eyes. No cameras. No mirrors. No reflective surfaces. Nothing that could create a record of his presence. The transition took approximately 30 seconds. Not instant. Gradual fading. Which meant Daniel needed to remain unobserved for 30 seconds to become fully invisible. The invisibility persisted as long as observation remained impossible. But the moment anyone, or anything, could potentially see him, he'd start becoming visible again. Same 30-second transition. Same gradual return. And the most frustrating limitation. Daniel couldn't verify his own invisibility. The act of checking, looking at his hands, finding a mirror, taking a photo, would make him visible. The power worked perfectly. But only when Daniel couldn't confirm it was working. He could turn invisible, but never know for certain that he was. Daniel Park was 32 years old. IT security specialist. Remote work mostly. The kind of job where he spent days alone in his apartment, monitoring networks, responding to threats, existing in digital spaces more than physical ones. The ability should have been revolutionary. Should have given him access. Freedom. Power. Instead, it was functionally useless. Because every situation where invisibility would be valuable, infiltration, surveillance, theft, espionage, required either cameras or human witnesses. And both made Daniel visible. He couldn't break into buildings with security cameras. Couldn't spy on people without risking being seen. Couldn't steal anything because the act of grabbing an object would make him visible to that object's perspective. The ability was perfect. And perfectly pointless. A philosophical paradox wrapped in superhuman biology. Daniel kept it secret, because explaining it meant explaining how limited it was. How it only worked in situations so isolated that it couldn't actually be used for anything meaningful. The first time Daniel used it deliberately was 4 months after discovery. He was being followed. Parking garage again. Different level. 2 guys. Bad intentions visible from 50 feet away. Daniel's heart raced. Adrenaline spiked. Fight or flight. Except Daniel couldn't fight. Wasn't trained. Wasn't strong. His only option was flight. He ran. The guys followed. Daniel ducked into a maintenance corridor. Dead end. No exit. No way out. The footsteps were getting closer. Daniel had maybe 15 seconds before they found him. He pressed against the wall. Made himself as small as possible. Held completely still. The maintenance corridor was dark. No windows. No cameras. No one else around. Daniel stopped moving. Stopped breathing loudly. Became as unobservable as possible. And prayed the 30-second transition would complete before the guys rounded the corner. 28 seconds. 29. 30. Daniel felt the shift. Felt his body complete the transition to invisible. Right as the two guys entered the corridor. They looked around. Saw the dead end. Saw Daniel's jacket, still visible because he'd dropped it running. But didn't see Daniel. Didn't see him standing 5 feet away. Perfectly still. Perfectly invisible. Perfectly terrified. Where'd he go? Must have gotten past us. Come on. They left. Daniel waited 2 full minutes before allowing himself to become visible again. To confirm he was safe. To process what had just happened. He'd used the ability. Successfully. Saved himself. Through absolute stillness and perfect isolation. But the experience wasn't empowering. It was terrifying. Because Daniel had been invisible and couldn't verify it. Had to trust completely. Had to believe the ability was working while having no way to confirm it wasn't. For all he knew, the guys had seen him. Had decided to play along. Had walked away for other reasons. Daniel would never know for certain whether he'd been invisible or just lucky. The pattern repeated cautiously over the next 6 months. Daniel started using the ability in low-stakes situations. Places where invisibility would be useful but failure wouldn't be catastrophic. Avoiding awkward social encounters. Standing perfectly still when someone he didn't want to talk to was nearby. Hoping the 30 seconds would pass. Never confirming whether it worked. Skipping lines by standing motionless in blind spots. Allowing himself to fade. Moving forward when people looked away. Never verifying. Never checking. Just trusting. Evading his landlord during rent week. Becoming invisible in his own apartment. Staying completely still when the landlord knocked. Waiting for him to leave. Never knowing if the invisibility held or if the landlord just gave up. Each time, Daniel had no proof. No confirmation. Just the apparent results. People not seeing him. Situations resolving in his favor. But always the doubt. Always the uncertainty. Always the possibility that he'd just been lucky. The ability worked. Probably. Maybe. Daniel could never be sure. The FBI found him 9 months after discovery. Agent Wilson. Different conversation than usual. More confused than confident. Mr. Park. We've been tracking anomalous security footage. Multiple locations. Same pattern. People appearing and disappearing in areas with no camera coverage. You're at the center of most incidents. I don't know what you're talking about. We think you can turn invisible, but only in specific circumstances. Areas without observation, without surveillance, without witnesses. That's an incredibly rare ability, and incredibly difficult to verify. Daniel didn't respond. Wilson pulled out a folder. Timelines. Incident reports. All the moments Daniel had used his ability. All documented by negative space. By things that should have been seen but weren't. We want you to work with us. But honestly, we don't know how. Your ability only functions when it can't be observed. Which means we can't verify it. Can't test it. Can't reliably deploy it. It's the most frustrating power we've ever encountered. So why recruit me? Because impossible to observe is still valuable. Situations where someone needs to be present but unseen. Where cameras and witnesses aren't an option. Where the only confirmation of success is the mission objective being completed. That's rare, but it exists. Daniel thought about it. What's the survival rate? For operatives we can monitor and extract? 85%. For operatives who have to work in complete isolation? We don't know. We've never had one before. That's not reassuring. No, it's not. But you'd be doing work no one else can do. In places no one else can go. For reasons that might save lives. If you're willing to trust the ability without ever confirming it's working. Daniel considered. The ability had saved him once. Maybe. Possibly. He thought. But he could never be sure. That uncertainty, that fundamental inability to verify, was the defining characteristic of his power. "I'll think about it," Daniel said. Daniel thought about it for 3 months. Took a test mission. Voluntary. Low stakes. Just to see if the FBI's approach would work with his limitations. They sent him to observe a meeting. Corporate espionage. Industrial secrets being traded. Standard surveillance. Except all the standard methods, cameras, wires, hidden microphones, had been countered. The meeting was happening in a room specifically designed to be unobservable. Perfect conditions for Daniel. He entered the building during business hours. Walked to the designated floor. Found a maintenance closet near the conference room. Locked himself inside. Waited for everyone to leave the floor. For all observation to cease. For 30 seconds of complete isolation. Daniel became invisible. Probably. He thought. He hoped. Exited the closet. The hallway was empty. No cameras in this section. No windows. No mirrors. Daniel walked to the conference room. Stood in the corner. Completely still. Completely unobservable. Listening to the meeting. 2 hours of discussion. Trade secrets. Illegal agreements. Everything the FBI needed. Then the meeting ended. People left. Daniel remained motionless. Waited for the room to empty completely. Waited for observation to cease. Allowed himself to become invisible again, or maybe he already was invisible, he couldn't tell, and exited. Returned to the maintenance closet. Waited for business hours to resume. For people to return. For observation to become possible. Allowed himself to become visible. Walked out like nothing had happened. Reported everything to Wilson. Every word. Every agreement. Every illegal detail. Wilson was impressed. That was perfect intelligence. Undetectable. Exactly what we needed. I couldn't verify I was invisible. The entire mission I had no idea if it was working. For all I know, everyone saw me and chose not to react. But they didn't. We've confirmed. No one reported an intruder. No one raised alarms. You were invisible. The ability worked. You can confirm that. I can't. I'll never be able to. That's the limitation. I have to trust completely without ever knowing for certain. Wilson nodded slowly. Can you live with that uncertainty? I don't know. But I'll try. Daniel joined the close call unit as a specialist consultant. Unverifiable infiltration. Intelligence gathering in completely isolated environments. Situations where his inability to confirm his own invisibility was actually an advantage because it prevented him from compromising the mission by checking. He ran 12 missions over 18 months. Each one successful. Each one leaving Daniel uncertain whether he'd actually been invisible or just impossibly lucky. A classified facility. Daniel entered during a power outage. No lights. No cameras. No observation possible. Walked through secure areas. Photographed documents with a camera that only he could trigger. Exited before power was restored. Never confirmed his invisibility. Never knew for certain if he'd been seen. A meeting between criminal organizations. Daniel stood motionless in an empty warehouse for 6 hours. Listening. Recording. Unable to move. Unable to verify. Just trusting that 30 seconds had been enough. That he was invisible. That no one could see him standing there. A hostage situation. The building was dark. The kidnappers had disabled all surveillance. Perfect conditions. Daniel entered. Located the hostages. Provided their exact location to the tactical team. Exited before entry. Success measured by outcome. Not by confirmation of invisibility. Each mission reinforced the same truth. Daniel's ability worked. Probably. The results suggested it. The lack of detection implied it. But Daniel would never know for certain. Would never have proof. Would always operate on trust and probability rather than verification. The breaking point came during a mission in Berlin. Deep cover operation. Daniel was supposed to observe a meeting between intelligence operatives from multiple nations. The location was a safe house designed to be completely unmonitored. No cameras. No bugs. No way to surveil remotely. Perfect for Daniel. He entered the building through an air duct. Made his way to the designated room. became invisible, hopefully, and positioned himself in a corner. Waited. The meeting began. Sensitive information. Covert operations. Things that could shift international relations if exposed. Daniel listened. Recorded mentally. Prepared to report everything. Then someone entered the room unexpectedly. A security sweep. Routine check. The guard walked the perimeter. Checking corners. Checking shadows. Checking everywhere. Including where Daniel was standing. The guard stopped. Looked directly at where Daniel was. Daniel held perfectly still. Didn't breathe. Didn't move. The question screaming in his mind, am I invisible? Can he see me? Is the ability working? No way to know. No way to verify. Just trust. Just probability. Just the hope that 30 seconds had been enough. The guard moved on. Completed the sweep. Left the room. The meeting continued. Daniel remained motionless. Finished the mission. Extracted successfully. But the moment haunted him. The guard had looked directly at him. It paused. Daniel would never know if he'd been seen and ignored. Seen and dismissed. Or actually invisible. Would never know if the ability had worked or if he'd just been incredibly lucky. The uncertainty became unbearable. Daniel resigned from the close call unit 6 months later. I can't keep operating on faith, he told Wilson. Every mission is a gamble. Every moment is uncertainty. I have an ability I can never verify. And that's not sustainable. But it works. 12 missions. 0 detections. Perfect success rate. Or I've been lucky 12 times. Or people saw me and didn't report it. Or the ability only works sometimes. I'll never know. That's the problem. Not that it doesn't work. That I can't confirm it does. Wilson was quiet. What will you do? Live normally. Use the ability for minor things. Avoid awkward encounters. Skip lines. Small applications where failure isn't catastrophic. Where uncertainty is tolerable. That's a waste. That's survival. I can't live in constant doubt about whether reality is cooperating with my power or I'm just getting lucky repeatedly. That's not a life. That's gambling with worse odds. Daniel Park is 34 now. 2 years since leaving the close call unit. 3.5 years since discovering the ability. 3.5 years of turning invisible when no one was watching. He still uses it. Occasionally. For minor things. Avoiding people he doesn't want to see. Finding quiet moments in crowded spaces. Small advantages that don't require perfect confidence. He works remotely still. Lives alone mostly. Exists in a life carefully constructed to require minimal verification. Minimal certainty. Minimal proof. Because Daniel learned something important about himself. He's not built for faith-based operation. Not comfortable trusting without verification. Not able to function in constant uncertainty. Some people thrive on trust. On probability. On moving forward without confirmation. Daniel isn't one of them. And his ability required exactly that. Required him to act without ever knowing if it was working. Required complete faith in something he could never verify. He could turn invisible. But only when no one was watching. Including himself. Including any method of confirmation. The perfect ability with the perfect limitation. Useful in theory. Torturous in practice. Some abilities empower you. Some enhance you. Some give you confidence. His gave him doubt. Constant, unresolvable doubt. Did it work? Was he invisible? Would he ever know? The answer was always no. He'd never know. Could never know. That was the price of the power. Perfect invisibility. 0 confirmation. And Daniel chose certainty over power. Chose verification over capability. Chose a life where he could confirm reality over a life where he had to trust it. He could turn invisible. But only if no one was watching. And Daniel realized he needed someone watching. Needed confirmation. Needed proof. Needed to know. The ability worked. Probably. Maybe. He thought. But Daniel would never be sure. And that uncertainty, that fundamental inability to verify the most important question about his own power, was worse than not having the power at all. So he lives small. Uses it sparingly. accepts that he'll never know for certain, and chooses a life built on things he can verify over a life built on things he has to trust. That's not weakness. That's self-knowledge. Knowing what you need. Knowing what you can tolerate. Knowing that some powers, no matter how useful, aren't worth the psychological cost. Daniel Park could turn invisible when no one was watching, and he chose a life where people watched, where he could be seen, where existence was verifiable. Because being uncertain about your own reality is worse than being visible.